Okay, now we're talking here about the elements of a bond indenture. And continuing that lecture, two other elements that you commonly see in a bond indenture. One has to do with the collateral on the bond. Now, collateral is something of value that you would come into as a bondholder should the company default on the debt. Now, this can be a property, some land or a building. It can be a portfolio of securities. So collateral can take on lots of different forms. But again, it's something of value that you would come into. All things being equal as a bond investor, you'd rather see good collateral as opposed to no collateral. So no collateral would be a riskier type of bond. When you study investments now and you study bonds, what you're going to find is that there are lots of different types of bonds. They go by different names. Those bonds, those different names now on those bonds are usually characterized by the kind of collateral that they have. Now, one of the most common bonds that you and I see out in the market, these are referred to as debenture bonds. Now, debenture bonds are characterized as bonds that have no collateral. Most of the bonds that exist in the market that we buy, these are indeed debenture bonds. They have no collateral. And the reason for that is that when the company went to the bank to borrow money, the bank made them sign an agreement, what's called a restrictive covenant. And in that restrictive covenant, the company told the bank that if you give me the loan, then I'll never offer any collateralized debt again. Well, banks like that because in bankruptcy, the bank wants to be the first one at the door to get collateral, to get their claim satisfied. So debenture bonds are very common, and they're common by and large because of these restrictive covenants that banks put on companies that they lend money to. But these are called debenture bonds, and debenture bonds have no collateral, zero collateral. In bankruptcy, you're simply an unsecured creditor. If a bond has collateral, not all the time, but very often you'll see the word mortgage in the bond, in the name of the bond. If you see a mortgage bond, you know it has some collateral. Also with a mortgage bond, you'll see a number at the end of it. The first mortgage bond, second mortgage bond, third mortgage bond, so on and so forth. And that's your place in line. So all things being equal, if you have a mortgage bond, you'd rather have a first mortgage bond. That means you have the first claim on the asset that is the collateral on the bond. And you're going to get paid first. Only after the first mortgage bond, people get satisfied. Do the second mortgage bonds, people go through and they take everything they can get, and then the third mortgage and so on and so forth. So just like at the deli now, you want your number to be as low as possible, okay? That's going to be your place in line, and you would rather be first in line to make a claim on the assets than far back in line. You'll also see the word subordinated quite often in bonds. Now, a subordinated bonds means that you have a lower claim on the assets. So if you had a subordinated debenture bond, if the company went bankrupt, after all the secured people went through, the unsecured creditors would then go through it. Well, the first ones would go through would be the debenture bond holders. After they go through, that's when you go through. So your interest is subordinate to the debenture bond holders. You have a lower interest if you want. But the word subordinated means that your interest, again, is subordinate, lower to whatever the bonds are that this word is attached to. But you often see the word subordinated. I want you to kind of know what that means. An important element also in a bond indenture now, this is called the sinking fund. Now, a sinking fund is run by the trustee, and a sinking fund is a pool of money that the trustee runs. And with sinking fund provisions now, the company will have to give the trustee cash or securities periodically. The trustee then invests the money, and this is how they make sure that the company is going to be able to pay off all the face value that's owed at the end of the life of a bond. Remember, with a bond now, they have to pay interest only until the very end of the loan. And then they have to pay back all the face value. So if this were a $100 million issue, and it was a 9% bond, the company would pay $9 million a year in interest. But if it's a 10-year bond, but 10 years from now, the company has to come up with $100 million to pay off all the face value. It's that big face value that they're trying to take care of with the sinking fund. You want to have a strong sinking fund. You want to have lots of money around so that the company can pay off the debt, the principal portion of the loan, in essence. But this is called a sinking fund. It's run by the trustee. The company is required to periodically put in cash or securities into the sinking fund, and the trustee manages the money so that it can pay off the bond at the end of the life of the bond. And again, this is called a sinking fund.